Good morning. Good morning, everyone in this meeting room and online. Welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. My name is Marjorie Wormser. I will be your Sunday associate this morning. Welcome to this vibrant, inclusive, justice-seeking group. And whoever you are, wherever you are in life's journey, you are welcome here. We adhere to the principles of Unitarian Universalism, which you can find in the newcomer card in the seat in front of you or online on our website at muuf.org. And please feel free to take this card with you, whether you're a newcomer or not. This is a great time to silence phones and other noise-making devices as we prepare for this morning's worship service. And if you'd like to take a brief moment to greet someone you didn't come with, either with a hello or a bump elbow, okay. Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for greeting one another so warmly. And kudos to everyone in the room who turned their clocks ahead last night so that you could be here. I have a few brief announcements to share. Please respond to a call, email, or text about nominees for the Ministerial Search Committee. We hope to complete our calling tomorrow. If you have not heard from us yet, please send a brief email to the office and we will call you right away. There will be a new member class next Saturday, March 18th at 10 a.m. Reverend Joel would be happy to talk with you about coming. And I believe lunch is served, yes? And for those of you who are attending, lunch will be served for this class. The second and third grade religious education class is collecting supplies for an animal shelter through today. It says Sunday, March 12th. Yes? Or through next week?
I don't know.
Someone know the answer? It's through today. Okay. Thank you for confirming that. Please consider donating cat food and treats, bully sticks or long-lasting treats, cans of pumpkin or sweet potatoes, Kong toys, the donation boxes in the Great Hall, which out these doors, and the area where you entered our building. There will also be a mindfulness meditation this morning following the 11:15 a.m. service. There will also be a talent show on Saturday, April 1st at 3 p.m. This is a 100% organized by children, is open to all of us to show off our talents. And finally, Reverend Joel will be hosting a Passover Seder dinner on Thursday, April 6th at 6 p.m. Please register on Realm, our database, by April 2nd if you'd like to participate in this. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Joel Miller. I'm the interim minister here at the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. So glad to welcome you all here this morning. Maybe we're a little lighter, so we have more folks watching online still in their jammies, I bet, because of I don't know, it feels, what time is it? Yeah, it's early, yeah. So I'm thinking a lot about risk in the service this morning. Taking a chance. When is it good to take a chance, and how much of a chance do I maybe want to take? So when I think it was about 19, I always wanted to be, I wanted to put like a stripe in my hair. We used to, at the time, if you were a little punk, you'd put a stripe, some peroxide in your hair, maybe you'd peroxide your entire hair. I just wanted the stripe, but I had a job and the boss I had was like, yeah, no, you can't do that. And one of my friends said, well, Joel, you have a little punk in you maybe, but it's more like Mr. Rogers punk. So I told the story to my daughter, and my daughter said, Dad, you should so do that. And my daughter was like 26 years old, and she's cool. I don't think I've ever rated maybe as cool. I don't know. She said, that would be so cool. And I was like, oh, come on. I'm in my 60s. I look goofy. And she said, no, it'd be cool. So I took my daughter up on it. So I have a little blue thing in my hair, you might have noticed. I like it. I love this blue thing in my hair. And you know what I love most about it? One, the people who I work for think it's fine. And secondly, just about anywhere I go, somebody will look at the blue and they'll go, oh, I like your blue. And then I end up talking to them and I learn their name and get to know who they are. I love this blue streak. I'm keeping it. It felt like a risk when I did it. And if I had known what the payoff was going to be, it wouldn't have been a risk at all. I'm just so glad to welcome you all here this morning as we gather to celebrate life, to learn more about living well and with one another. Good morning and welcome. I believe next that we will light our chalice. Would you like to help me with that? Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. It's a great covenant to dwell together in peace, to serve truth in love, and to help one another. I invite you to sing with me. I invite you to stand in body or spirit. As we sing at this time, we are singing, There's a River Flowing in My Soul. I'd like to invite children, youth, young at heart, anybody would like to help me tell the story this morning to come on up here to the bema, to the stage, or the chancel. Morning. Glad to see you guys. Hi there. Aw, yeah, saying hello to your friend. It's good that we can be here with friends, right? You know, when I was growing up, my grandfather and my father and family, we had a jewelry store. I grew up in a family business. and we would make and sell jewelry. We sold a lot of jewelry, things like bracelets and diamond rings and wedding rings and sometimes necklaces or earrings. I loved the business. People would come in, and usually they were really happy. Sometimes they were sad, and maybe they were selling the jewelry back or something, but it was really fun. And when I finished school, I graduated from college, I went to work in my family's business. And I had other jobs with other people, so I knew a little bit about, what it was to work for someone. But I'd been worked for about 2 weeks with my family. My dad said to me, "Come on over." There was a jewelry salesman, and he was, we couldn't make all the jewelry we sold. We sold a lot of jewelry. And so my dad was ordering some jewelry, and then he said to me, "You order some jewelry." Now, how many? A lot. Like so many pieces of jewelry. He said, "Go ahead and order." And it was for like the Christmas season. And so I ordered things that I thought were beautiful. Well, then they made all of this jewelry. And so a couple of months later, all this jewelry came in special boxes. And we opened the jewelry, and my dad said, that shipment of the new jewelry came in, all the necklaces and earrings. And so I opened all the boxes and put all of the jewelry into the display cases where people could see the jewelry. And my dad came out to look at it after I'd put it all in, and I could see it in his face. He looked at what he'd ordered, and he looked at what I ordered, and he looked at what I ordered and thought, "Oh my God, how are we going to sell that?" Now, my dad had been very generous, and he just let me order what I thought would sell. This is the funniest part of the story for me, because years later, my dad said, "And everything my son bought sold right away, and mine didn't." And that's not how I remember this story. I remember that everything I bought and everything he bought together, it worked together so well. Everything sold out, and it wasn't even Christmas yet. We had to make a special emergency order and get more jewelry. My dad took a risk. He took a chance on me and let me spend a lot of money, like the kind of money you might spend to buy a house. It was a lot of money. And I was grateful he took that risk and let me buy all of those beautiful things. And it turned out to be a good risk. We made money that year. It was good. You're going to go to your classes, and we are so glad that you are here with us, and we hope you have a great time together, and we'll see you after the service. Go now in peace. Go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. We light a candle, a chalice. We put a flame into a chalice, a symbol. And it reminds us that in our gathering, we bring light to one another's lives and find new light for our own lives. When there are significant milestones or passages, we remember and light a candle. We lit a special candle last week for Tom McCarthy. Tom was a member here and died last January, and we learned about it a couple weeks later, and we're remembering him this morning. There's a candle of joy. Bob Scott and Irene Mendelsohn are soon to land in Johannesburg. They're repeating the trip that they began and couldn't finish 3 years ago when COVID arrived. Susan and Jonathan Jeans Wright. We saw Allison Miller and David and Asher last weekend. They were doing Find and Send Their Love Portland is a fun city, and they're enjoying all the concerts, garden. And importantly, I know, having been in Oregon, they're enjoying Powell's bookstore. Go Powell. It's a milestone and a passage for our kids who have the freedom to take some risks and are putting together a talent show. How cool is that? That they have a community in which they can just do it. And a special passage that I'd like to share at this time this morning is from Judy Romano. She writes, "It felt so good to attend service last week in person. I will not be able to attend again in person soon. I hadn't been feeling quite myself for a few years, but last October I was working the fellowship's table at the Morris County Coming Out Day street fair. I had an episode of some sorts. I could barely finish, with Noelle's help, packing up our table, and then began my quest to find out what was going on in this seemingly healthy body. Myriad tests and medical procedures to find answers turned out to be just dead ends, and now, finally, I have an amazing team of 7 physicians. 2 weeks ago, their consensus on my elusive condition was MPA-ANCA vasculitis. I have a rare, incurable autoimmune condition. It damages the small blood vessels through my body. The next step is to put the condition into remission with 4 weeks of infusion starting on St. Patty's Day. It'll take a minimum of 3 months to see if it works. The doctors assure me that chances look good. My physical presence at the fellowship will be diminished, but I will still be with you. Hi, Judy. We're waving to her online. I will serve in any way I can. The future we have planned for the Morristown UU Fellowship is exciting and so loaded with potential. No way am I missing out on this party. So on St. Patty's Day, raise an extra infusion of your favorite liquid for me. Wish me well. See you online, Judy. I invite you into the spirit of meditation or contemplation or prayer as you are comfortable. Live in us, Spirit of life. Here we are alive, living lives because others have lived and built homes into which we were born, homes we did not build. Live in us. Every one of us is in some way alone. Certainly no one can live a life but our own, each our own lives only, and we have to make our choices, take our risks before our lives end. Live in us, Spirit of life. We are not alone. Any act any one of us chooses changes other lives, just as every act others choose changes our lives. Live in us, Spirit of life. We are hurt. Most often we are hurt in error. There are hurts that come with the risk of living, the risks we all must accept in some way. Live in us, Spirit of life. Live in us. We know joy when souls embrace. We bring more life into this world. Live in us. We are alone and yet bound together by unbreakable bonds. We know hurt, we know joy. Let us choose life. Let us choose life in a way that others may also live and live with joy. May we bring each other joy. And in the hurts that come to us all, may we learn to solve each other's suffering. Live in us, Spirit of life. That our lives bless those who live, even when we have died and are forgotten by all but the holy. May we live so that they may bless the home of love we leave for them. Live in us, Spirit of life, that we may live in you. For all that we are and bring, so be it. Amen. Blessed be. This hymn I'd like to sing with you this morning, the second hymn, number 51. You've not sung it before. Alex, our wonderful AV tech back there, has said to me, you've been choosing now for how many weeks straight? I don't know, 3 or 4. I'm choosing hymns we don't have in slides, and he's been making us slides. I'm thinking, let's play this through once, and I'm going to sing it. We'll sing the first verse, and you can listen if you'd like. And then we'll sing the first verse again and finish singing the song. Yeah. I invite you to stand in body or spirit.
Your steady mercy, lead us.
I forgot to mention during announcements that those announcements and others are on the back of your order of service and on our website. There are some exciting things coming up. So this morning's reading is from a book, A Feminist Ethic of Risk, by Dr. Sharon Welch, who was the professor of religion and society at Meadville Lombard Theological School, which is the Unitarian Universalist school for ministry in Chicago. The only choice we have as we mature is how we inhabit our vulnerability. Our choice is to inhabit vulnerability as generous citizens of loss, robustly and fully, or conversely, as misers and complainers, reluctant and fearful, always at the gates of existence, but never bravely and completely attempting to enter, never wanting to risk ourselves, never walking fully through the door.
We take our offering now at this time, a ritual by which we remember that we make one another vulnerable, we become vulnerable in how we share the resources of our time and our lives. And through this, we make a difference in one another's lives and in the world around us. Our offering this morning will be split 50-50 with Wind of the Spirit. Wind of the Spirit is an immigrant resource center. They work to make their mission a reality in which all have rights as well as responsibilities, and we live in a community with a just and humane immigration policy. You can donate via text to give number, as described in the order of service. Father is in that story that I shared with you. Excuse me. My dad took a big risk those many years ago. He let me spend a lot of money. He didn't know what kind of jewelry was this. I'd grown up in the business. Yes, I knew something about jewelry, and yet I'd never really placed an order for jewelry before. And I ordered very different jewelry than he would have ordered. It paid off. I was a free-range parent myself as my children grew up. It was not easy to be a free-range parent in the 1990s and early 2000s. Their mother and I encouraged our kids to walk to school, for example, which they liked to do. Admittedly, the school was not far away, about 2 blocks. Nonetheless, even with just 2 blocks, they walked the 2 blocks alone, just 2 blocks. For me, I walked 1.5 miles to school. My kids must have thought I was like talking like my grandparents. I had to walk 10 miles in the snow. There were still parents at the elementary school who would tell us we were irresponsible, even neglectful because of our free-range parenting and our children unaccompanied as they walked to school. So many judgy comments. What if somebody kidnaps them? I suppose you let them climb trees too. Usually I didn't say these words, but they were in my head. Actually, yes, I let them climb trees. Our son got stuck in one once in the backyard, a very tall pine tree. He'd climbed up, and then he looked down, and he started yelling, "Dad, Dad!" I talked him down, one branch at a time. He was fine. After that, he climbed trees, and he didn't need help anymore. The other thing I always wanted to say to the parents who were afraid in those days, "Oh my God, you're one of those free-range parents. Your kids are going to die." The odds of a child being kidnapped by a random pervert or murderer, what were the odds? I looked them up. Incredibly small, incredibly small. The odds a child would be kidnapped at the time were 1 in 300,000. And the vast majority of those kidnappings were by family members, usually an estranged parent. We didn't have that situation. So the odds of our kids being kidnapped by some random stranger were 1 in 10 million, maybe? Compare that to the odds that they might die of an accident by choking, 1 in 3,400, or that they would be hurt or killed in an auto accident, 1 in 50. So drama and dramatic news reports, they sell advertising, but most of us aren't good at translating the odds into real life. It's hard. It's not easy. In fact, even the way I translate odds into real life doesn't really exactly line up with how you're supposed to do statistics, yet close enough that I minimized risk for my kids in a way that I thought was sensible. I didn't like it that when my kids were in school, they spent many hours being taught about stranger danger. And yet, the kids then would get into their families' cars after school, the number 1 cause of death in the United States for children and youth. Car accidents, number 1. Number 2 cause of death, guns. Guns in homes. Number 3, diseases like cancer. COVID, for a while, was right up there. Last year, it dropped to the 8th highest cause of death. At one point, it was 4th, maybe 5th. And the way to manage the risk, have good air quality, have good ventilation systems. There's good ventilation systems in here, for example. We run filters, and the air circulates with good outside air. It's important to take care of one another, minimize risk. Reasonable risk. And I researched the dangers to my children. I would talk with their teachers. What do you think the riskiest things are? I would talk with ER doctors. I'd find articles in science journals. The most important way I thought I could help my children understand some of the risks, especially around sex and their bodily integrity, was to say, well, stranger danger, yeah, not that serious, really. More importantly is what you took in your OWL class at church, as we called it, the fellowship or the congregation that they were attending. Most of our congregations, including this one, have a curriculum called OWL, Our Whole Lives, that teach children of all ages, age-appropriate information about their bodies, how their bodies work as they get older, about sex. My children learned about bodily integrity, and when they might want to say yes to like a physician who might need to touch them in certain ways, and that they could say no to other folks. I wasn't so worried about that with my children. In fact, one of the greatest worries I had in those days was that as my kid walked to school or climbed the tree in the backyard, that a neighbor would call the police, social workers would come, and there'd be a lot of drama because of, well, frankly, what I thought was an overwrought society. Not that I was a anything-goes free-range parent. My kids were obviously safer walking to school than they were in the car. But I didn't let them go to a friend's house until I talked with the parents and was assured either they didn't have guns or the guns were locked in a gun safe. I restricted their time on video games and TV. They were too old to have the smartphones with the screens, although when they got older and some of their friends started getting the clamshell phones that would flip open, I held out as long as I could. I wanted them to have friends. I wanted them to read books. I didn't want them staring at screens. Especially making friends, because loneliness is a high-risk problem at any age, and especially these days with screens. I let my kids go to the park. It was a half mile away. It was a great park. It was in Buffalo, New York. Now, they had to go with a friend or with each other. There always had to be two of them. Because, truth be told, I still was a little worried about creepy strangers, but if they were with a friend and later as they got older, they would have those clamshell phones, they were safe. They had a way to access help if they needed it. Free range didn't mean foolish, just it meant they were able to have a sense of freedom and learn a sense of responsibility. And I didn't want to be judgy about it. I just didn't want to be judged. Other families were worried about stranger danger, and I didn't want to be judgy on them about it. I just was irritated that they were getting judgy on me and we were going to call social services. Every family needs to find the balance that works for them. Each of us as individuals find our own balances, and congregations also find their balances of risk. We look at what it is we believe in and try to understand why it is we're here, and from that, evaluate the risks that we take, because we're always taking risks. A member of a church I once served told me she needed to have a difficult conversation at work. She was managing a staff, and one staff member was in their first job, a young employee, and they had a lot to learn about how to do a job well. She scheduled a meeting with this new young employee, and the employee told her they wanted to bring their mom. And the member of the congregation said, Joel, I just wanted to check this with you, but I said, I'm sorry, you can't bring your mom. And I said, I agree. I think that was all right. I tell you this story because I worry that if our children don't learn to balance risk, to take risk and then balance it in their lives, they get to be old enough that they don't know how to judge when to be responsible, when not to be responsible, when to take a chance or when not to. I want to protect our children. I want to protect the congregations I serve. I want to protect the people and myself, people in my life and myself. It's hard to find the right balance. So how do we as Unitarian Universalists how do we balance risk? So that's why the title of this sermon, A Feminist Ethic of Risk. It's based on the book by Sharon Welch. There are three concepts in her feminist analysis of risk. The three concepts are 1, responsible action, 2, grounding in community, and 3, strategic risk-taking. Responsible action, she describes as setting the table for success. And as she says in the reading, it's to be all in with our lives, our living. We know that in theory, life is not risk-free. But our culture, she writes, gives us mixed messages. Even in Unitarian Universalism, especially for me, as somebody who grew up with the scientific method as a key tool for understanding life, we had this sense that if we just thought things out well enough, we researched things carefully enough, we would simply have the right answer. And, that wasn't an unreasonable place to be in some ways, especially in the middle of the 20th century, where science was taking us, the advances in medicine, the advances in the way we can communicate with one another, the changes my grandparents saw from riding horses to people taking rockets to the moon. Perhaps we could have all the right answers, we thought. We've discovered that's not the case. And patriarchy itself, that aspect of human culture that says women are less than men, and to be a man you have to be a certain way, and you can't be another way, and tells us there's really only one way. Patriarchy whispers a lot of lies to us. It's one of the things feminism tries to help us understand, where that way of thinking that there are right answers and the right answers are somehow male in nature, I don't know. Anyway, it whispers to us that if we're smart enough, if we're logical enough, we will choose or devise exactly the right thing to do. And we'll avoid all risk. And that's not true. It's never true. Welch says we have to live our lives all in. The only choice we have is how we inhabit our vulnerability. Will we be generous? Like this congregation, so very generous. Or conversely, we can be minors, we can be complainers, we can be afraid, we can live in fear. Never walk fully into our lives, fully live what's possible. But what was especially helpful for me was Welch described this kind of odd thing that she found at Unitarian Universalists and other folks who might think in liberal ways or progressive ways, in ways in which we find the maximum amount of freedom. We find ourselves often tormented by that lie that we can think our way through a risk-free life. And sometimes it surprises us in the way that it appears. This is how I find myself listening to the lie or living by my fear instead of living life full in with all of its risks. The voice in my head says, we weren't victorious. We didn't quite make it. Our logic must have been flawed. We must have done something wrong. Well, I'm going to have to minimize risk more than I have been. Maybe I should just be avoiding risk. I end up avoiding an uncomfortable conversation then. Or I've seen people stay in jobs that suck their souls dry, that they hate. The way I see it happening most often in congregational lives these days, congregations past the eighth principle, for example. We want to be congregations in which we practice a way of being that is against racism and is for a beautiful way of being together, one in which we are all met for who we are and what we bring. None of us here wants to be a racist. I know this. And it's really, really frustrating when we find ourselves doing or saying something that's racist, or find ourselves in a larger system that has us doing racist things, and patriarchy whispers in its weird way, no, you're not a racist. You've chosen not to be one, therefore you aren't one. And then when we find something that we do is hurtful on the basis of race, we get really angry. No, I haven't done this. And the incredible risk that appears, one, the risk of a really profoundly unpleasant feeling, seeing how it inhabits us. And then the second risk, which is, it's risky to be living that eighth principle, to live as an anti-racist, to say something to that, well, for me, to say something to that brother-in-law when he makes a racist joke and say, dude, really? And then know that my family's going to be really upset about it. Or go out and be in a demonstration at which violence may occur because of others who are counter-demonstrating, or sometimes that it just feels so, I feel so despairing as I look how difficult it is. The thing about living all in life, I've learned from the wisdom of black folks in America that it's best not to live with despair or that avoidance, that fear of pain, or that fear of being wrong or being revealed as not being everything I want to be or expect myself to be. Toni Morrison, Octavia Butler, two wonderful novelists I can recommend reading about despair, fear. Despair, giving up, not taking the risk, those actually are greater risks than living fully into life and taking the risks. You know, it's to learn this lesson from folks who can easily be killed just by being pulled over for a brake light that's out. And having those same folks say to me, despair is a luxury I don't have time for. I hope you don't have time for it either. Responsible risk-taking means we show up for life. We set the table. As Sharon Welch says, set the table for success. The second point, grounding in community. Knowledge only exists in community. Basic humanist practice. Perhaps it separates me a little bit from our transcendentalist roots, where we can know something intuitively as individuals. I think to some degree that's possible, but I'm too much a humanist in the sense of the 20th century practice of Unitarian Universalism and humanism. I like my knowledge to be tested in a community of reason. It's the scientific method. Good science requires a peer community. A scientist does her work, has a hypothesis, does an experiment, tests the hypothesis, and if the hypothesis works, then she proposes a theory. But it's not a theory until the paper's published and some peers review it and go, oh yeah, that makes sense, or oh, you missed something here. Peer review. We have to be grounded in community as we take risk. We talk to one another, share deeply. We live in a chaotic world these days. No one can predict really even the future. Well, no one's ever been able to predict the future, but it feels a little more chaotic than it used to, I think. I mean, the SARS-CoV-2 virus arrived. Now we worry about COVID. We're living in the pandemic came. It's less of a pandemic now. Is it like a chronic pandemic instead of is it an endemic? I don't know. Nobody's even talking about exactly what to call it. COVID's around. Stupid COVID. So we are trying to figure out risks like with our kids. We could keep them always in masks, keep them home, keep them always outside, and not engaging other people, but terrible, terrible risks for our kids of not being in social situations, of not learning basic developmental skills at essential times in their lives, if they're not in school with one another or not in a homeschool situation where they're meeting other kids and learning about life. And then there's COVID. How do we balance that? It's a good analogy for the larger world we live in, because there is no right answer for it. There are sometimes right answers. If you have COVID, stay home until the symptoms go away, and then wear a mask for a while. There's a right answer there, but beyond that, how do we know, for example, how to plan congregational life 5-10 years down the road? There's actually a really great tool for it, and this is for this second part, this second point and risk management, I want to introduce you to adaptive thinking. As we ground ourselves in community, how we think together is so important in congregational life. So what is adaptive thinking? Let me start by saying what isn't adaptive thinking. Technical thinking, or technical problems, and then there are adaptive problems. Technical problems have right answers. When it's time to wear a mask, there are times that the right answer is, yeah, you gotta wear a mask. If you have COVID and you've gotta go into the doctor's office, you gotta wear a mask. If you're gonna build a bridge across a river, there's ways to build the bridge so that it stays up. There are right answers about how to build a bridge. I don't want somebody building my bridge and saying, oh, I think it'll work, and then I'm driving on it and it falls down. And then there's adaptive thinking. They don't have right answers. The answers can be ambiguous. A child thinks, what do I want to be when I grow up? There's not a right answer, but there are many very good answers. A congregation says, we feel called to care for more people, to serve a larger world. How do we want to do that? There's not a right answer to that, but there are many good answers. And in a world of change, where, say, this congregation, having chosen to build a wing and figuring out all of the details to finish making that happen, there's many technical right answers and many answers that are still ambiguous, especially ambiguous in a world that's constantly changing. How will we use the building? We don't actually know yet. We have to think adaptively. What are the risks of filling it every day of the week and every evening of the week? What are the risks of not building it? What are the risks of growing? What are the risks of not growing? In a complex world with so much ongoing change, we have to be willing to experiment, find good answers, which is always a series of conversations that we have with one another, loving, caring conversations, and acknowledging at the same time it won't be risk-free no matter what we choose to do. If we're going to take a risk, let's choose the risks. Let's choose outcomes. The outcomes we think are worthy of the risks that we have to take. So to have conversations, adaptive conversations, we have to be emotionally savvy about ourselves. The bottom line for congregations, to think adaptively in a complex world, be curious, not fearful. Be appreciative, not resentful. And then this third aspect of good risk management and a feminist ethic of risk for Unitarian Universalists, strategic risk taking. So as I mentioned, I grew up in my family's jewelry business. My dad lived by the odds all the time. He lived by real odds. He'd look at where the market was. He'd look at what his customers were interested in. It was a great business. We knew our customers really well. I sold wedding rings to people whose grandparents had bought their wedding rings from my grandfather. It was a great business, deeply embedded in community. We'd take risks on beautiful jewelry, and customers would come in and they saw the jewelry that I had bought and the jewelry my father had bought. My father took this great risk on me, and I still can to this day can remember the look on his face like, oh my gosh, what have I unleashed? And yet, the outcome was something we hadn't even predicted. He had thought, it'll be interesting to see if we can build a customer base by which we sell this. But the outcome was something more than that. By having my father's vision of what could sell and my vision of what could sell, our business grew 3, 4 times bigger than it had been. Gay Vertoli is a scientist. He's a teacher, writer, and he knows how to have fun. One of his books is titled 50 Dangerous Things You Should Let Your Child Do. He writes about the 5 top dangerous things kids should do. Number 1, walk to school, because it is not as dangerous as we feel it is. Note that he didn't say think it is, feel it is. Kids who walk to school, apparently, research shows, kids who walk to school are healthier and have more street smarts. Number 2, climb trees. Every tree you climb is unique in the way you have to climb it. You can't pre-plan how to climb the tree. You just have to be responsible for yourself. Think on your feet. Think with your hands and your body. 3, burn things with a magnifying glass. Did any of you ever do that? I did that when I was a kid. There's nothing like understanding risk and the power of that you can hold in your own hands by taking the energy of the sun, focusing it onto something in the driveway and seeing what happens. Yeah. 4, he said, make a bomb. Baking soda bomb. Any of you remember one of my kids, when he was young, did that volcano thing where I think it's vinegar and baking soda, foams over. My son continued to experiment with all kinds of things. He used to, when he was a kid, he'd take everything out of the bathroom closet and he'd pour it all together to see how the viscousness mixed together or whether it'd be a reaction. I wouldn't let him mix chlorine, bleach, and ammonia. Just saying. Never do that. I got him some dry ice, and he played with the dry ice. He understood not to touch it, and he saw why. How almost like the clouds would form coming off of the dry ice. And then he got smarter as he got older, and he started putting the baking soda into an old pop bottle, and then he'd pour some of the vinegar in that and turn it upside down, and it would shoot up into the sky. It was really cool. Sometimes those bottles would even blow up a little bit. And then number 5, super glue your fingers together. And the reason that Tully says to do this is that your mind creates new neural pathways from the experience. You have this dilemma where you can't pull your fingers apart. And then finally, when you can, or maybe you take some solvent that dissolves the glue, there are literally new neurons that grow in your brain as a child or even an adult comes to understand the way their body works and the power within their body and within the tools and chemicals we create. And so we try to bring the same philosophy then into life with our youth, for example. So we had a lot of debates, especially 10, 15 years ago. I came from a time in Unitarian Universalism when we had a theory of youth empowerment. We wanted our children to learn how to be, the adults in my congregation wanted me to learn how to be powerful, how to organize things. So when I was in youth group, I would organize trips with the other youth. And the parents saw their role as one of just making sure that we didn't get ourselves into any big trouble. If we got in a little trouble, that would be, little trouble is good. You'll learn a lot from it. And about the same time that I was struggling with, can I even be a free-range parent and not have the police show up, we were even having our own debates about maybe we should always be telling our high schoolers what their program is, what they're going to do, just plan out their curriculum for them. Given my own experience, I really appreciated that sense of youth empowerment where we would learn to work together, create our own community, and make decisions about what our community would do. We learned about the true sense of feminist power, which is not power over, but power with, the power we create with one another. So these three ways of understanding risks as Unitarian Universalists, which for me comes really out of feminism itself, to prepare ourselves to take good risks, to understand rationally the situation in which we live, then to understand the context of it, that we all come out of community, and that what any of us does has effects on others, as others, what they do affects us. And the only way we can be sure we're taking good risks is to check it out with one another. And within that, there are some risks that we might choose not to take because, well, there's a right answer. Don't take that risk. And to be careful and adaptive with the more complex decisions that we have to make. And then to be strategic about our risks. Perhaps even have a little fun with them. The best way to keep ourselves safe and our youth safe, ourselves safe, in a world that's complex and always with a little danger in it, is to take real risks and good ones. The best way for us to live in this unjust world is to be uncomfortable as we, at the same time, seek to make others comfortable. This is the path to justice. It's the path to a future that is one based on our values, and yet a future we cannot predict. I'd like to sing together. This closing hymn is number 1014, Answering the Call of Love. Yeah, there it is in the top. I'd like to invite you to stand and body your spirit as we sing together, 1014. Thank you for Ella Axelrod, who is here today. She's our guest pianist this morning. We're glad to have you here. Thank you. And this is a new song for Ella, and so we'll be learning together as we sing this.
Let me help you. Let me help you.
Beth can help with that.
I will help you.
The Let's take the light of life, the light of hope, the light of courage that lets us live fully in our lives and set for an example for the world of how to live fully and to do so with love. Go in peace, be in peace, take that light with you, and we'll be together again. He's going to practice.
Well, not too long because I need to piano.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to look at the record. All right, here. He's playing next week, so I just want to give him a chance to do a run.
We covered the two chairs
Yeah.
with arms. One of them was here, one of them was there, so now you've got a chair with arms. The things we have to do.
10 to 11, and I'm one of the co-leaders of the service, so we'll just be about 5 minutes. When is the next service? 11:15.
I don't know if you saw, I filled your water bottle, it's on the sound cabinet, I'll bring it over.
Yeah.
You have your choice.
It's cold, it's from the fridge, but it's still.
Is this too high? Try this. Does that feel good? Go ahead, whenever you're ready. Do it. Get Let's get this centered to where you can move. Now actually, hold on. Are you starting with middle C? Reasonable C. Here, yep. Yup. Okay. Here, centering the C. Take it comfortably. All right. Good. Go ahead. Thank you.